Are there any other shoes to
No.
drop that we
No.
need to be concerned about?
There are not.
That's my question. Okay.
There are not.
So if there's a follow-up phone call and further discussion, we're not going to be additionally blindsided?
Not from my end, no.
That's what I want to hear. And I would say to Mr. Chittick and as well as to our consultant in NorCal EMS, are you aware of any other potential shoes to drop?
I think in the discussions with the providers and with other people in the community, everything that... Sorry. Oh, Rick, you're right. No. Okay. I think everything that could come up as an issue has been identified. What we haven't found, though, is the areas of consensus. So whatever comes up as one issue, we still have to recognize that the other party here is going to then try to raise it from the other side. So yes, they've been on the table. They've been on the table for months. But we're not able to get consensus, and that's why we're back 4 times. I don't know if that answered the question.
That helps. I guess.
I might add, Mr. Supervisor, that we have the additional hurdle to overcome when we think we have generated consensus to try and express that in written form in such a way that meets the satisfaction of the state, and that has not always been an easy accomplishment. And so I guess my remarks are along the lines of, and I don't want to cause any undue concern, but what's proposed here today in terms of draft and clean copy, I don't necessarily know that we've received a kind of tentative nod from the state on in terms of the manner in which it's being expressed.
Well, I'm not worried about the tentative nod of the state. I'm more concerned about the nod of NorCal EMS and
Understood.
And the various providers who are concerned, because we seem to have that as an option.
Yes, sir.
Aaron, you had a question?
I did. Just goes back to Mr. Smith a little bit, as well as maybe Mr. Spees. In the Zone 2, the suggestion for Zone 2 is to what potential help. I mean, where would that be put in this transportation plan, and what wording would be used? Would it be in this, or would it be in the RFP? What's the...
Both zones, the 1 and 2, are addressed within the plan. The RFP would only be for the Zone 1. Zone 2, the north area, has been served by multiple ambulance providers out of that area. Putting a provider or requiring the south provider to put a unit up there to serve that area, economically it's not efficient. It's not going to happen if we were to divide the Aden area from the Beaver area, cutting across the county line. It has to be one provider up there. That area, as everyone knows, has still been in flux for a few years, and it needs a separate solution. But requiring the Susanville provider to also have a base in that area would mean that they're being cross-subsidized by the patients in the south area. In other words, higher rates here to cover the losses there. And given the payer mix, the Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance mix that we have in this county, it's very unlikely that Susanville can generate enough calls to support a unit at Aden.
I agree with that 100%. My question is how would it be in the transportation plan of what can you do to potentially help up there? Is it just putting an ambulance up there 1 day a week? Is it providing training for the EMTs? What kind of wording would you put in there? So what kind of help can you provide Zone 2? I guess is the question I want to ask, and where would that be put in, and how would it be worked?
I want to make sure I understand your question, so give me a second to think it. In the plan itself, it's not addressing any changes within Zone 2. Okay, as written, as in front of you, the plan. What I think I heard from the providers in both of them over multiple meetings was the possibility of saying in the RFP, require some level of service to Zone 2. That has not been addressed because from the beginning of trying to develop the RFP and the standards, NorCal and myself, and then working with county staff, we've tried to minimize the expenses of providing service in this county. Given the really marginal economics of ambulance service in this county, we wanted to not throw in a lot of things that were going to raise costs. So therefore, anything that was going to go beyond the pure provision of service in this area at the level, the most base level that we could find to meet acceptable standards, was not put in there. So to this point, we have nothing addressing the Zone 1 provider assisting in Zone 2.
Mr. Patrick, you had a comment on that, then Mr. Crosby.
Yes, sir. In my letter that I sent to all of you, I simply said, this is for, if you're talking about sort of Beaver and that area, Beaver, New Beaver, whatever it is, Eden, for that area, what I simply suggested, you don't have to change your plan. Just ask in your RFP for providers to give suggestions because they lost their ambulance up there. It's not economically feasible for them to do that. But ask the people in an RFP to say, how might we serve this? What might be your doing that? And I guarantee you there's not enough calls up there from everything I've learned in a number of meetings. You can't support a full-time ambulance up there. Are there other ways to do it? I believe there are, but that's where you just ask in an RFP. I don't think you have to change your plan. Just ask it in an RFP. See what we can do to help anyone.
Thank you.
Mr. Crosby.
It's not as simple as Mr. Smith just made it sound. The RFP has to be based on competitive criteria that a review committee of experts will look at to make a recommendation of which of the hopefully multiple proposals we have they should recommend. And throwing in extra criteria such as, by the way, what can you do over here, really confuses the process of trying to figure out which is the best provider for the area to be served. So, yeah, we can ask, do you have any other ideas, but to make it part of the criteria would be very difficult in terms of running the process.
Thank you. Mr. Crosby.
Just quickly on the North County, I don't want to spend too much time addressing that because it's not really a part of what's going on with.
I'm sorry, could you state your name?
Sorry, Keith Crosby.
Thank you very
Mount
much.
Lifelight. Sorry about that. In fact, we, Mount Lifelight, offered to try to help them with their situation up there. And it's been very clear from the committee that's in the North County that they don't want any help as of right now because they have a plan that if anybody were to try to help them that they feel could derail their plan. And that's with our discussions with them, that's what they've said. Am I mistaken in that?
No, that's pretty close.
Okay, so we're trying to fix a problem that's not on the table here. So I want to kind of get back to what we're here for and a point of clarification because I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like a lot of people haven't quite understood what's going on through this whole system. So as far as what's up there, the BLS part that has been brought back to you in front of today is pretty much inconsequential. SEMSA says there's 300 runs. My question to them is how many BLS runs have they actually built for in the last 10 years? My guess is it's far less than 300, probably less than 100, which we're all up here today understanding that the 150 that is estimated in North County does not actually warrant a full-time ambulance. So we're here to solve a problem for less runs than there is in North County. So they're worried about somebody coming in and opening up a BLS-only operation to take those runs away from whoever it is that wins it. So we're really solving a problem that doesn't exist when it comes to BLS. So as far as Mount Lifelight's opinion is on it, the BLS, non-emergency services, is inconsequential. We have no issues with that. If you want to add that in there, it was pretty much already there without it being there. Nobody's going to come into town to operate a BLS-only ambulance. In fact, for the last 10 years, it has been perfectly legal and possible that any ambulance company, not Mountain Lifelight only, anybody could have come into Lassen County and opened up a ambulance to take both ALS and BLS for interfacility transfers. Perfectly legal, and NorCal has said numerous times through this process that that is correct. Okay, in that 10 years, not one person has done that. Nobody's done that. So we're here to solve less than half of that problem for the BLS. So as far as Mountain Lifelight goes, we have no issue with adding the BLS, non-emergency services, in there. It's inconsequential. We're not looking to get into a BLS or an ALS only interfacility transfer. I don't think there's any other company out there that's going to either because they've had the opportunity and haven't. So the only issue is by pulling the word ALS out of there, which you've then included which was not there before, which is the critical care transport. So clarification on what that is. Do you understand what an ALS ambulance is? What that means?
Advanced life support.
Okay, but who's on that? Who's on that?
Why don't you tell us?
It's a paramedic is your highest level. Okay, what we're asking you to look at is a critical care transport. So above and beyond the scope of a paramedic. Okay, so that's a nurse in this case that can do things that a paramedic can't do. Usually those are flown out of here to a different facility. That's the norm. That's what everybody would like to have happen because those are the most critical patients. That's what we would like to do. That's what we're in the business of doing. That's what we want to do every single time. Unfortunately, in Susanville, we all know sometimes weather's bad. Sometimes you can't do it. We have a fixed wing when weather's bad for the helicopter, so we'll try to do it by a fixed wing. Sometimes the weather's too bad for a fixed wing, so then you can't do it that way. The only way to get them out of here is by ground. And if they're doing things that are above the advanced scope of a paramedic, if you put that in there, you are limiting the hospital to have virtually no options to get a critical care transport out, except you're giving whoever wins the bid, doesn't matter who it is, the option of how to get them out of here. If that choice is to have a nurse come all the way from Reno to pick up that patient and take them to Reno, well, you've just added an hour and a half. You don't actually have a way to dictate whether they can or can't do it that way because for the last 10 years, there has been no monitoring whatsoever on the time limits to get a patient out of Banner Lassen Hospital. Zero. In fact, only about 24% of the transports that is done by SEMSA, as of numbers that I've looked at in 2011, only 24% are actually on any kind of a time frame for you guys to monitor and then penalize. 24%. That's it. So you're giving them something, or you're giving somebody something with no monitoring and no way for the doctor to say, you know what, your hour-long wait for that patient with a stroke is unacceptable. We want somebody else to do it. You're handcuffing them. All this for less than 5 patients a year. Historically, it's been about 3 or less. I'm saying 5 to be completely open as to what potentially could happen. If you put a critical care transport section in there, or just leave the ALS. Just leave the word ALS. Put everything else in there. Give them BLS. Like I said, it makes no difference. You're handcuffing those 5 patients that are the stroke patients, that are the people who are most critical. And once again, we're back to before we said less than 1%. Five calls a year. Is that going to make or break anybody bidding on this? When in fact, if a person that bids on this does not give in their plan how they'll handle that critical care transport, it's very feasible that their plan, that their bid could be thrown out because they have not addressed how they'll handle that critical care transport. And most ground ambulances do not put a nurse on their payroll to handle 5 calls a year. It's just not going to happen in a rural community. So you're limiting the people that can even bid when you do that. So, thank you.
So we're talking, I got a question.
Oh, sorry.
We're talking about 5 calls.
Actually less, generally, yes.
That's your opinion.
No, not my opinion. I know exactly how many we've ran. I'm talking about the critical care transport portion of it. Not the BLS. Like I said,
Right.
you can use what they can say 1,000. I don't care because we're conceding that if that's what the county feels is in the best interest, we are not going to argue that because we're not looking to get into BLS transport. So make that part of it.
We're talking about 5 calls that go by ground instead of by air out of here, is what we're arguing for today.
That are critical care
Critical
transport
care calls.
issues. Correct.
Do both you guys agree to that? Mr. Smith, you're shaking your head.
I can speak to that. This is a Nortel issue, but apparently we've had, okay, Ben, help me out here, in the last 2 weeks, 3 calls, Mike, that we're sending to Nortel of transports that have occurred. Now, we're your current provider. My point is, it's not 5 calls. It's not whatever. And you know what? If you ask me to bid, then ask me, how would you provide critical care transport? How would you provide all of the ground transport needs, how would you provide those? Everyone. And a provider in a rural community should be able to tell you how they would provide that. And Dr. Narad, within the scope of an RFP, should be able to say, describe this for us. Describe this for us in these areas and do this stuff. And let the providers tell you how we might all, these guys, us, any of us, tell you how we would provide total service to a rural community. That's my only point. Whether it's 5, and we can argue all day long, it's more than 5. And as I looked or heard on the NorCal conference call, which started the letter, which started all this, I apologize again, but it is like having the language, whatever you gentlemen want. We will then bid whatever it is subsequently to us. All of us will. Everyone. Tell us what you want. But for the patients in the economics, I throw it all under, say, you're the provider, you're the experts, we're farmers, you're the experts, tell us. And let the independent people say, you got it. Go figure it out. That's what my letter tried to do.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
According to my flight last week, they had to take a patient to Reno because Denver was not able to. Did I understand that correct?
My understanding is that's incorrect, sir. We were able to, we had units, and I actually had this discussion last night, and our manager could speak to that, but we were able to.
Why didn't dispatch call you being a local provider during the facility transports? You need that call?
I do not know. And Ben, I don't know.
I can speak to the fact
This
that
is more a NorCal issue, where we've been dealing with NorCal to deal with that, but
Okay, first I'll have Crosby, that was Dan. Dan, go first.
I
We
don't
received
know.
I'm Dan Spees. We received a report on this yesterday. We're looking into it. I think some of your questions are the exact same questions that we're going to be asking. We've got to dissect it, take a look at it, and then render an opinion on it from our medical director. So it sort of sounds like we could be getting into the investigation prior to our job for you to look into it and conduct an investigation.
Basically, this is non-eventful for us because it's not an investigation yet.
Well, we'd like to be able to have the time to talk to all the parties that are involved and dissect what went on and then
Thank you.
offer an
Mr. Crosby.
opinion on it.
you asked the question, so I felt that we should answer it. The only reason we took that call, like I said, we're not in the ground ambulance business. We took that call because it was unable to fly and because the doctor had contacted our dispatch after not being able to get an ambulance out in a timely fashion through SIMSA. And this was a stroke patient.
Thank you. Okay, first thing I'd like to say is blaming this process being stringing out this long is not the fault of NorCal. They have been very good in doing what they've been asked to do by the NorCal board and by this board. Saying the process is not working, I would say it's working very good because Mountain Lifeline had their chance to make changes to this transportation plan and they lobbied this board. The current providers of ground ambulance had also had a chance to make their comments, which they did at the NorCal meeting. My interest is being sure we do it right and we get all input possible. All the public gets a chance, the current providers all get a chance to say what they think. And that is what's happening. Is it delaying the process? Yes. Because we have let the current providers make comments, and even though we have deadlines to meet, we have used the process, whether it be this board or the NorCal board, to do it. when I was made aware of at the NorCal meeting, BLS, I haven't heard anything about it. I didn't know if it was important or not. I know this board did not know anything about it. I was not comfortable, and the NorCal board was not comfortable moving ahead with something that this board was not aware of. So I thought only right to be sure this board is for Lassen County being totally aware of all the issues. So I would say the process is working very good. And with that said, this new amendment to the transportation plan, I would support Mr. Chapman.
Well, before we take up an action to approve it, could I suggest some corrections?
You bet.
And this has nothing to do with content, it has a lot to do with format. If you go to page 4, I'm using the one that has all the amendments. I'm not using
The draft copy? The draft copy.
Yeah, I'm using the one where you make sure all the corrections are being followed. Scrutinizing the corrections. And you have, this is about 2/3 of the way down. You have pages 13 being struck, 15 being added, and 16 being added, 15 being struck. And this is dealing with the ambulance zone summary forms. And if you go to pages 15 and 16, you'll find that the forms are actually 13 and 14. So either we have to fix that back to, they need to be consistent. So page number wise, when you talk about on pages 15 and 16, you're actually referring to the board resolution and the NorCal resolution talking about the approval. So
13 and 14.
13 and 14, so that's the first one. Then you go to page 7, and it appears that on numerous occasions there was the word appendix or whatever was put in there, everything was bold. So there was a lot of changes made to take the bold formatting out. And if that's indeed was the purpose for all those, then you probably should fix appendix 5, because you have appendix bold, but the number 5 is not. So that would be one to clean up. But more importantly, right above that, about 4 lines, you have the word BOARRD, and I think you have one too many R's there. I know that this process has been stuttering, but that's one that should be kind of fixed. And there was another one, and I wasn't quite sure what the, find it, where it's ahead of here. Oh, it's in the approval form. I'm glad you changed the RFP was issued from February 15th to March 15th, because you misspelled February. That fixed that problem. You have on page 14 and 13 and 14, in the ambulance zone summary, you make reference to figure 1, underlining and striking out figure 1, and I'm not sure why that that changes like that. So.
And I'm sorry, the question is why is it underlined?
Why do we have 2 figures, one underlined, one strike out? I can understand you replace one with the other, but it looks like you replace figure 1 with figure 1.
Figure 1 underlined.
Yeah, the figure 1 underline is adding language. When you use underline, strike is when you're eliminating somebody. But it's, I just thought it was interesting that you were replacing something with the exact language of what you were striking. So, yeah, I mean, it just, and I was trying to see how that translated.
Okay.
It just shows as figure 1 in the final clean copy. So I guess that was an earlier edit that was still.
In the final,
Yeah, it just shows as one figure.
Right.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, I had a question on page 3. You're talking about the description of the current system, talking about the geography. You have a summer high of 93 degrees with an average winter low of 28 degrees. That didn't seem quite right to me. An average winter
Not
low.
for this year, but
But for several years, that just seems a little bit odd. And then on page 6, I had a couple of questions. Under advanced life support, it says all emergency ambulances in Lassen County will operate at the ALS level. That brings back the question, you have the ALS here, you have the ALS, and then we also have the potential in zone 2 of going up there. I mean, are we going to be restricting ourselves with that? with that statement?
I think if I'm not mistaken, that particular, on page 6, where it says all emergency ambulances in Lassen County operate at the ALS level, is intended to provide a description as to the current system in place now, not a statement necessarily as to what might be required in the future by RFP process.
It does beg the question how 300 BLS transfers were made if all the ambulances were
Or
Because it's
or
oversight.
does it refer to Zone 1 versus Zone 2? Because Zone 2 doesn't have an ambulance operating at all. So to say,
And they're looking at getting one, and what they have up there just may be a BLS.
you might want to say in Zone 1 is being a more definitive description of Lassen County rather than all Lassen County.
But the whole transportation plan is zone one.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, it should say that.
The reference here was on the emergency ambulance, so it wouldn't include the interfacility transfer, which could be DLS or critical care.
And then my next question is, down below that, you have the dispatch services. You know, we go through talking about the Susanville Interagency, the highway patrol, everything else. Is that same thing, does that same apply to all of Lassen County? Or is it just for down here? Because here again, you have North County up there, and you also have the Cedarville side over there. I mean, I just want to make sure we're doing this right.
The way I read it is it applies to the whole county.
So if somebody from Bentonville calls for an emergency, is the phone call going to come to here?
I think those are,
Those go to
not.
Shasta County, if I'm not mistaken.
Eric,
I can talk to that briefly. It depends how they call. Eric, doing emergency services chief. If they call landline within the county, it goes to the sheriff's office across the way. If they call mobile phone, and that's in a state of flux right now, it may go to CHP, and it might be Reading CHP, it might be Susanville CHP. It depends where they're at and what tower it's bouncing off. But technology, as it progresses, eventually those calls will go to the sheriff's office within that county that the call came from. So, yes and no to answer your question.
I mean, is this going to be appropriate the way this is worded, dispatch services? Is that going to be appropriate? I just don't want to see us get ourselves.
It would be very, very difficult to paint that picture as to where that call goes, because there's so many exceptions with the technology changes since this was originally written 10 years ago. That cell phone component is changing about every 6 months. And with the ultimate goal being, if the call comes from Lassen County, it goes to the primary P7 of the county, which is the sheriff's department. That's the goal.
Okay.
It's going to take time. So I don't know how best you could achieve without going into a 2-page dissertation on how the system is designed to say that call from Pitmore Little Valley is not going to go to Reading versus Susan.
Right, I just don't want to be painting ourselves in the box that we're,
I understand.
you can't work with it.
Right.
My last questions was on the response time standards.
good page.
This is page 8. If you go down the list, Beaver, 60 minutes. I agree with that. Doyle, 60 minutes. I wonder if that's too long. Furlong is 60 minutes. Patton Village, 60 minutes. And Spalding, 60 minutes. Those 4 there, I'm wondering if those times, if they're appropriate or if they're a little low. I don't know.
Currently, how many ambulances do we have stationed here in Zone 1? 3. And where are they stationed at?
One's in Susanville, one is in Westwood, and the other one is in Janesville.
Okay. So it takes upwards to 60 minutes to get to Janesville, 1 to Furlong or Doyle?
Not usually.
No. Well, and the reason why I think the point you make is well taken is, given the fact that was my impression, we had the 3 ambulances, one being in Janesville, that the ability to get from Janesville to Furlong Doyle, the purpose was to be able to provide more timely services in the southern part of the county. But this indicates that Furlong and Doyle are part of the wilderness, and I would not think that they're a wilderness, because you can, it's almost to the point now, I'm convinced they've shortened the road to Reno, because it used to take us forever to get there, and now it seems like you just blink a couple of times and you're there. And I mean, it's a lot faster because of the speeds that they've increased and the safety of the road. So getting from Janesville to Furlong isn't going to take you 60 minutes.
And from Susanville to Beaver, can take 60 minutes, but I mean, Spalding's halfway, and you got 60 minutes for that too, so, you know, that's why I was just
Well,
asking.
the road north here, is not near as fast as going down south, I mean, because of the shoulders and everything.
That's what I'm saying.
I know you can make it from Aiden to
Okay, let's
Susanville.
not talk about that. So what I'm saying is, you got people 60 minutes, so that's what I